Shuya Ishida tears all the pages of his calendar after April 15th. Before the date, he quits his job, sells all his belongings, and retrieves all his money from the bank. In April 15th, he leaves the money alongside his overworked mom, walks to a bridge, and climbs onto the railing, convinced that disappearing was the only way to take responsibility for the pain he had caused. But just as he was about to go through with it, a firework burst across the sky, pulling him back to a memory he had spent years trying to bury. Back in elementary school, Shuya was nothing like the lonely teenager he would become. He was an energetic troublemaker who spent every day fooling around with his friends, Shimada and Hiros. They jumped into rivers, played games, and lived carefree lives without a single worry. To them, every day felt like another adventure, until their teacher announced that a new transfer student would be joining the class. A quiet girl stepped to the front of the room. After hesitating for a moment, she opened a notebook and introduced herself in writing. Her name was Shoko Nishimiya, and because she was deaf, she relied on the notebook to communicate with everyone around her. The classroom immediately filled with whispers as the students tried to process something they had never encountered before. Shoya saw her as something strange that had suddenly entered his ordinary world, and his curiosity quickly turned into something much darker. At first, several of the girls welcomed Shoko. They wrote messages in her notebook and did their best to communicate with her. Ueno was even one of the first students to help her adjust, but as time passed, everyday classroom activities became frustrating. During music lessons, Shoko struggled to sing along with everyone else, and when she was asked to read aloud, her hearing impairment made speaking clearly incredibly difficult. While some students felt sympathy, Ueno slowly began seeing Shoko as an inconvenience instead. Rather than standing up for her, Shoya joined in. Whenever Shoko tried joining conversations, she struggled to understand what everyone was talking about. When the girls played together after school, she often found herself left behind. One afternoon, Shoya threw a pebble at her to get her attention, and told her that if she wanted people to like her, she needed to stop acting the way she did. But Shoko misunderstood his intentions completely. Believing he wanted to be friends, she pointed at herself, pointed at him, and offered to be friends in sign language. But Shuya didn't understand what she meant, threw dirt at her, and walked away, leaving her standing there with the same gentle smile she always wore. Soon afterward, one of the teachers suggested that the class learn sign language so they could communicate with Shoko more easily. Ueno immediately dismissed the idea, insisting that writing in her notebook was more than enough. But another classmate, Sahara, felt differently. She genuinely wanted to understand Shoko and became the first student to sincerely learn sign language. The two quickly became friends, giving Shoko her first real connection at school. Unfortunately, Sahara soon became the next target. Ueno relentlessly mocked her for helping Shoko until the constant bullying became too much to bear. Eventually, Sahara stopped coming to school altogether before transferring away. Instead of blaming the classmates who drove her out, everyone blamed Shoko. One afternoon, several students stayed behind after class and covered the chalkboard with cruel messages accusing Shoko of causing Sahara's departure. When Shoko entered the classroom, Shuya hurriedly erased the insults before she could read them, pretending he had nothing to do with it. Believing he had protected her, Shoko thanked him with a smile, but her kindness only frustrated Shuya even more because he could not understand why she continued forgiving people who treated her so terribly. As the months passed, the bullying escalated. He and Ueno tossed her hearing aids back and forth like toys, treating the expensive medical devices as if they were nothing more than entertainment. It continued until one day, Shuya accidentally pulled too hard, injuring Shoko's ear, and that incident finally forced the adults to intervene. After school, Shoko confronted Shuya, but instead of yelling at him or demanding an apology, she apologized herself. She then pointed at herself, pointed at him, and offered to be friends in sign language. Shuya was completely unable to understand her, and why someone he had hurt so badly still wanted to reach out to him. He then grabbed her communication notebook and threw it into the nearby river. Without hesitating for even a second, Shoko climbed into the water to retrieve it herself, and that single moment marked the beginning of the end. The following day, the school received a formal complaint from Shoko's mother. Multiple hearing aids had gone missing throughout the year, and she believed someone at school was responsible. The headmaster explained that each hearing device cost an enormous amount of money, causing the entire classroom to fall silent, but everyone knew exactly who had been involved. When the teacher demanded answers, the classmates who had laughed alongside Shuya immediately abandoned him. Ueno denied taking part in any of it. Shimada claimed he had tried to stop the bullying all along. Kawai burst into tears and portrayed herself as another victim. Desperate to defend himself, Shuya exposed everyone else's involvement, but nobody believed him. And the class had already chosen its scapegoat, with the bully becoming the only person left to blame. After school, even Shimada and the others turned against him. They shoved him into a fountain before walking away, leaving him completely alone. For the first time in his life, Shuya experienced the same isolation he had forced Shoko to endure. When he arrived home, his mother, Miyako, already knew everything. Although heartbroken by what her son had done, she still stood beside him and decided to apologize to Shoko's family herself. Before meeting them, she withdrew a large amount of money from her own savings to compensate for the damaged hearing aids. Shuya was stunned to realize that the burden of his actions had fallen onto the woman who had worked her sweat, blood, and tears day and night cutting hair to raise him. When they finally met Shoko's mother, Miyako sincerely apologized and offered the money to repay the damage. While the adult spoke privately, Shuya noticed Shoko quietly feeding birds nearby. Hoping to avoid her, he tried sneaking away but immediately slipped and fell. Moments later, his mother returned, and he was horrified to notice that one of her ears had been injured during the confrontation. Even after everything he had done, she continued shielding him from the consequences, and all she asked in return was that he become a better person. But by then, Shuya's world had already fallen apart. The friends who once laughed beside him refused to acknowledge his existence, and the boy who had spent months making someone else feel isolated suddenly found himself completely alone, being the bullied one. But then, he found Shoko on his desk, and to his shock, he found her cleaning his desk of the horrible words other students had written there. Instead of being grateful, Shuya refused to be pitied, and instead charged at Shoko, asking why she was helping him if he was the one who hurt her. It turned into a tussle, which ended with Shoko beating Shoya in strength. After that day, Shoko moved schools, and for the first time, Shoya truly understood the loneliness he and his friends had inflicted on Shoko, and that realization would haunt him for years to come. Years after the bullying incident, Shuya was still carrying the weight of everything he had done. The guilt never left him. Every time he walked through school, he kept his eyes fixed on the ground because he was convinced everyone was judging him. In his mind, every conversation was about his past. Every laugh was directed at him, and every face reminded him of the person he used to be. He built walls around himself, pushing everyone away before they could reject him first. But instead of hiding forever, he finally decided to face the person he had hurt the most. After tracking down where Shoko attended her sign language classes, Shuya gathered the courage to see her again. The moment Shoko recognized him, she froze. Years of painful memories rushed back all at once, and before either of them could say a word, she turned around and ran. Shuya chased after her and eventually caught up. Nervously, he greeted her using sign language for the very first time. He explained that he had spent years learning it, then handed back the communication notebook he had kept ever since elementary school. Finally, he pointed at himself, pointed at her, and offered to be friends in sign language. At that moment, he was shocked, because by learning sign language, he noticed that all those years back, Shoko was always asking him to be friends. Shoko was speechless, never imagining the boy who had bullied her would learn her language just to apologize. Tears welled up in her eyes as Shuya realized his apology could never erase the past, but it could become the first step toward making things right. The following morning, Shuya woke up to his young niece Maria calling him downstairs for breakfast. His mother Miyako thanked him for the money he had saved, but the conversation quickly took a much heavier turn. She had figured out everything. She knew he had sold his belongings, emptied his room, and planned to disappear. She wasn't upset about the money, but she was devastated that her son believed his life no longer had value. Desperate to make him understand, she begged him to promise he would never try something like that again, and even threatened to burn the money if that was what it took to get through to him. Remembering the pain and struggle she endured, Shuya apologized and promised he would keep living. Unfortunately, Miyako's dramatic gesture went a little too far, and the money accidentally ended up burning anyway. Even so, the moment made Shuya realize just how much pain his mother had quietly carried because of his mistakes. Walking to school afterward, Shuya found himself thinking differently. He once believed disappearing was the only way to make up for hurting Shoko, but after seeing his mother's tears and meeting Shoko again, he began wondering if becoming a better person was the only apology that truly mattered. Even so, the thought of friendship still reminded him of the classmates who had abandoned him years ago, especially Shimada. Ever since the bullying was exposed, Shuya had lived convinced that nobody would ever want him around again. During lunch, he quietly ate by himself outside the school. Nearby sat another student who was also completely alone, an awkward, overweight boy who looked every bit as isolated as Shuya once had. Although he noticed him, Shuya couldn't bring himself to say anything, and his thoughts remained fixed on seeing Shoko again. Back home, Miyako apologized for burning the money, explaining that she never wanted to keep savings that represented so much pain. Shuya simply promised he would earn it all back again, but this time he would save for a future instead of preparing for an ending. A few days later, he set out to meet Shoko again, and on the way, he noticed the same lonely classmate being pressured by another student who wanted to borrow his bicycle with no intention of returning it. Normally, Shuya would have walked away, but watching someone else being pushed around reminded him too much of his own past. Instead, he offered his own bicycle to solve the situation. Forced to walk home afterward, Shuya wondered if fate simply didn't want him to see Shoko. Then he spotted a coupon for a loaf of bread lying on the ground. Taking it as a lucky sign, he decided to try anyway. This time, he arrived carrying an enormous loaf of bread, hoping it might help break the ice. But before he could even enter, a small boy blocked the doorway and insisted Shoko wasn't there. Despite the fact that Shuya could clearly see her inside, the boy confidently shut the door, informed Shoko that some strange person had come looking for her, and left Shuya standing there completely dumbfounded. On his way home, he unexpectedly ran into the lonely student from earlier, and the boy revealed that he had found Shuya's abandoned bicycle and returned it after noticing his address written on it. For the first time in years, Shuya looked at another person without imagining the giant X he usually pictured over everyone's faces. He finally saw someone for who they really were, and his name was Nagatsuka. From that day on, Nagatsuka became Shuya's first genuine friend in years. His loud personality couldn't have been more different from Shuya's quiet nature, but somehow they fit together perfectly. They watched movies, shared meals, and slowly gave Shuya a glimpse of the normal life he thought he had lost forever. One afternoon while eating together, Shuya asked what it actually meant to be friends. He wondered if there were rules or qualifications he had to meet before someone could accept him. Nagatsuka simply laughed and told him friendship wasn't something complicated, but it simply happened when two people cared about one another. That simple answer gave Shuya the confidence to try meeting Shoko once more. Unfortunately, the same little boy blocked him again. This time, he boldly claimed that Shoko was his girlfriend, nearly making Shuya drop the bread he brought with him. But after teasing him for a moment, the boy suddenly became serious and questioned Shuya's true intentions, whether he was only looking for forgiveness so he could feel better about himself. Before Shuya could answer, Nagatsuka stepped in to defend him. The two immediately began arguing so loudly that they attracted everyone's attention, including Shoko's. The moment Shuya realized people were staring, panic took over and he ran away. But this time, Shoko chased after him. With Nagatsuka and the mysterious boy watching from a distance, Shuya struggled through his sign language as he explained why he had come. Since Nagatsuka couldn't understand any of it, he asked the boy to translate. At first, the kid deliberately made up ridiculous translations just to mess with him before finally telling the truth. Shuya admitted he wanted to see Shoko again because he genuinely hoped they could become friends, and he wasn't asking her to forget the past or pretend nothing had happened, but he simply wanted the chance to know her again. To everyone's surprise, Shoko admitted she had wanted to see him too. For the first time since elementary school, Shuya realized their relationship wasn't completely beyond repair. The two spent the afternoon feeding koi fish beneath the bridge using the bread he had brought. It was an incredibly ordinary moment, but after years of isolation, simply spending peaceful time with someone else meant everything to him. The mood changed when Shoko opened the notebook Shuya had returned. Inside were the cruel messages their classmates had written years earlier, the same words that blamed her for everything. Before Shuya could stop her from reading them, the notebook slipped from her hands and fell into the river. Without hesitation, Shoko climbed over the railing to retrieve it, and this time Shuya didn't hesitate either. Instead of standing by like he once had, he immediately jumped into the river after her. In the end, both of them swam out completely soaked, while the notebook somehow landed squarely on Shuya's head, turning what could have been a dramatic moment into something unexpectedly funny, and Shoko simply smiled. The only person who wasn't smiling was the little boy watching, who still believed Shuya would only bring Shoko more pain. Later that evening, the boy created a fake online account using Shuya's name and uploaded a photo of him jumping into the river. By the next morning, the picture had spread across the school, and Shuya was called into the office and suspended for violating school rules. Once again, the past refused to let him move on. During his suspension, Shuya stayed home writing an apology letter. While picking up Maria from school, he stumbled across the same little troublemaker asleep alone at a playground. Rather than getting angry after discovering who had uploaded the photo, Shuya simply accepted it. He believed he deserved whatever consequences came his way after everything he had done. Still, he noticed something wasn't right, and that the child looked exhausted and had nowhere to go, so Shuya brought him home. When Miyako met the unexpected guest, she welcomed him without hesitation and prepared a warm meal. At first, the boy was uncomfortable because he wasn't used to that kind of kindness, but eventually he gave in. As for someone who spent so much time looking after Shoko, very few people had ever looked after him. That night, the boy couldn't sleep. His thoughts kept circling back to Shoko and everything she had endured. Although he could tell Shuya was trying to change, he still couldn't shake the suspicion that it was only for Shuya's own sake. Unable to settle his thoughts, he quietly slipped outside into the pouring rain. When Shuya realized he was gone, he searched the neighborhood until he found him wandering barefoot while taking photographs, one of his favorite hobbies. Without making a big deal out of it, Shuya handed him an umbrella and even gave him his own shoes before walking him home. Along the way, the child finally confronted him and asked whether Shuya was really trying to help Shoko or simply chasing redemption for himself. Shuya admitted it was both, and he couldn't deny wanting forgiveness, but More than anything, he genuinely didn't want Shoko to suffer because of him ever again. Hearing that finally changed the boy's opinion of him. He realized Shuya wasn't pretending to be a better person, and that he was honestly trying to become one. When they arrived home, the child finally revealed the truth that he had lied from the very beginning, and that he wasn't Shoko's boyfriend at all, but that he was her younger sister, Yuzuru. Shuya could barely process the revelation before another familiar face appeared. Shoko's mother. The moment she recognized him standing beside her daughters, years of bottled-up anger exploded and she slapped him across the face. However, Shuya never tried to defend himself, as he understood exactly why she hated him. Later that night, Yuzuru apologized to Shoko for everything that had happened, while Shoko apologized for causing everyone more trouble. Their mother confronted Yuzuru and told her not to meet Shuya ever again. However, the next day, Yuzuru went to Shuya's house to meet him, and the moment Nagatsuka saw her, he treated her like one of the boys. But when Shuya revealed that Yuzuru was actually a girl, Nagatsuka froze and retreated instantly. Later, Nagatsuka finally met Shuko and introduced himself, claiming that he was Shuya's true best friend. Then, Shuya took out his phone and asked Shuko which old friend she wanted to reconnect with besides him. To his surprise, Shuko chose Sahara, the girl who had once tried to learn sign language for her. The next day, Shuya began thinking about how he could fulfill Shuko's wish. While looking around, he noticed Kawai, who had also been classmates with both Shuko and Sahara. Gathering his courage, he approached her and asked if she knew how to contact Sahara. Kawai gave him the information, but said that Sahara's school was far away, and Shuya did not have enough money for the trip. Fortunately, Nagatsuka appeared and immediately offered to pay for the journey like a true sugar daddy homie. Before Shuya could leave alone, Yuzuru arrived with Shuko, who wanted to come along. The two traveled by train together, quietly standing beside each other while stealing awkward glances. During the ride, Shuko sent Shuya a message thanking him for helping her meet Sahara again, and seeing how happy she was, Shuya felt a warmth he had not experienced in years. When they arrived, someone suddenly called out to them, and it turned out to be Sahara, who immediately recognized both of them. The three reunited, and Sahara started communicating with Shoko through sign language. She apologized for leaving back then, and admitted that she had thought about Shuko for a long time. She regretted not being stronger and not staying by her side when things became difficult. While the two girls reconnected, Shuya quietly watched from the side. For once, he saw someone else bringing happiness to Shoko, and he realized that he was not the only person who could help her. However, when the conversation shifted toward more personal topics, including their melon sizes, Shuya became uncomfortable and decided to step away. During his walk, he unexpectedly ran into Ueno, who was working at a freaky club. Seeing her again surprised him, especially because of their complicated history. Later, Shuya received a video from Sahara, showing her and Shuko happily spending time together at karaoke. Seeing how naturally they got along made Shuya believe that maybe he could repair more broken relationships from the past. So his next target was Ueno, with Nagatsuka joining him. Shuya visited what they assumed was a place where dollar bills were thrown, only to discover that it was just a normal cat cafe. When Ueno noticed Shuya, she immediately hid, pretending she was not there. She avoided him completely, even wearing a disguise, causing Shuya to think that she wasn't there. At the same time, Shuko and her grandmother received heartbreaking news from a doctor, who explained that Shuko's hearing would most likely never return after everything she had gone through. Losing that hope hurt more than she had expected. Later, Shuya gave Yuzuru a small cat pouch he had bought for Shuko. But when Yuzuru returned home, she found her sister crying on the bed after hearing the doctor's words. The girl who had always tried to smile for everyone finally broke down. Days later, Shuya was riding his bike when Ueno suddenly jumped on behind him, acting as if they were still close friends. But when she noticed Shuko nearby, her attitude changed. Ueno apologized for what had happened in the past and suggested that they should move forward. However, Shuya rejected her attempt, telling her that things were not that simple. Then Ueno noticed the cat pouch Shuko had, and when she realized that Shuya had given it to her, she got off the bike and approached Shuko herself. At first, she acted friendly, but her old habits returned when she grabbed Shuko's hearing aid, repeating the same cruel behavior from years earlier. This time, Shuya immediately stepped in. He took the hearing aid back and refused to let it happen again, which shocked Ueno. She could not understand how the same person who had once hurt Shoko was now standing in front of her trying to protect her. She mocked Shuya for trying to repair the damage he had caused, but unlike before, he did not react with anger. Ueno eventually returned the hearing aid and left. When Shuko asked what they had been talking about, Shuya simply told her it was nothing important, hiding the complicated emotions between them. Not long after, Shuko changed her hairstyle, surprising Yuzuru, and she quickly texted Shuya to see Shuko's new look. She invited Shuya to the bridge, where he saw Shuko waiting with a new look. The two stared at each other awkwardly until Shuko gathered her courage and tried speaking with her voice. Because she rarely used it, Her pronunciation came out unclear and she became embarrassed. Shuya quickly reassured her, showing that he did not care about how imperfect it sounded. Before leaving, Shoko gave him a gift. Shuya opened it but had no idea what it meant, so he simply thanked her. Then Shuko took a deep breath and finally said what she had wanted to say, telling him that she liked him, but Shuya completely misunderstood her words, thinking she was talking about how she liked the moon. His confusion made the moment painfully awkward, and Shuko ran away embarrassed. Later, Shuya told Nagatsuka what had happened, but neither of them could figure out what Shuko had been trying to confess. Meanwhile, Shuko was at home, frustrated, and when she explained the misunderstanding to Yuzuru, the little homie was both surprised and impressed by Shuko's bravery. The next day, Shoya noticed Kawai's new hairstyle and remembered Shuko's change. Curious, he asked why girls suddenly changed their appearance, and Kawai explained that sometimes there was no special reason, but she also told him that another student, Mashiba, wanted to become friends with him. For the first time in a while, Shuya managed to look directly at someone's face. He saw Mashiba clearly, and it was a small moment, but for Shuya, it was progress. Later, everyone gathered together, but Shuko was absent, and Shoya immediately assumed she was avoiding him because of the confession incident. Yuzuru questioned why he thought that, and after hearing Shuya explain the situation, she realized exactly what had happened. She told him to simply ask Shoko to hang out, so that night, Shuya sent the message, and when Shuko received it, she became extremely happy, while Yuzuru watched and felt relieved to see her enjoying herself again. The group eventually visited a theme park together. While everyone was having fun, Yuzuru noticed Ueno spending time with Shoko, and did not trust her intentions. During one ride, Sahara sat beside Shuya and talked about how riding a roller coaster represented facing fear. She explained that she had once run away from difficult things, but now she wanted to challenge herself. When the ride began, Sahara raised her arms confidently while Shuya desperately held on, showing that he was still unable to let go. Afterward, Shuko's legs were shaking from the experience. Shuya checked on her using sign language, and Kawai and Mashiba were impressed by how naturally he communicated with her now. Nagatsuka, however, immediately became jealous and acted like everyone was stealing his best friend. Despite the chaos, Shuya realized that he was happy, and for the first time in years, he was surrounded by people, laughing and making memories. He even began to look at Ueno without fear. But when Ueno asked him to get food with her, they ran into someone from his past, Shimada, his former best friend. The moment Shuya saw him, all his old feelings returned. Shimada told Ueno not to pretend she could fix their friendship, and Shuya immediately shut himself away again. He walked off, putting the same emotional wall between himself and everyone else. Ueno tried explaining that she only wanted them to become friends again, to which Xiaoya hated hearing, but then he realized something. He had been doing the same thing with Shuko, trying to repair the past because he wanted to make things right. Ueno then admitted that things would have been easier if Shuko had never entered their lives, but Shuya refused to accept that excuse. He told her that what had happened was his responsibility, not Shoko's, and that he was the one who had to live with it. Ueno then pulled Shuko away and invited her to ride the Ferris wheel with her, but before they left, Ru handed Shuko her camera because she wanted to take another ride on the roller coaster. Meanwhile, Shuya continued spending time with the others, unaware that something important was happening between the two girls. A day later, Yuzuru visited Shoya and showed him that she had a recording from the Ferris wheel captured by Shuko's camera. However, the video only showed Ueno's legs while the audio revealed the conversation between them. Inside the Ferris wheel, Ueno finally said what she had been holding in for years. She admitted that she hated Shuko, and not because Shuko had done anything wrong, but because she could not understand how Shuko kept trying to become friends with her, despite everything Ueno had done. She blamed Shoko for the way their childhood had changed, claiming that because Shuko had entered their class, Shuya had lost his friends, and everything had fallen apart. Ueno then offered Shuko to shake hands so they could continue hating each other honestly, but Shuko refused. Instead, she apologized again and admitted that she hated herself more than anyone else. Hearing that made Ueno furious. She told Shuko to stop apologizing and acting like she was the only one responsible for everything. Then, overwhelmed by her emotions, Ueno slapped her, and the recording left both Shuya and Yuzuru shocked. For Shuya, hearing Shuko blame herself hurt because he realized she had been carrying the same guilt he had been carrying all this time, as he wanted her to understand that she deserved happiness too. At school, Mashiba asked Shuya about Shuko and Ueno's relationship. He revealed that Kawai had told him about Shuko being bullied in elementary school, and because Mashiba hated people who hurt others, he wanted to understand what had really happened. Hearing that, Shuya assumed the worst, so He immediately confronted Kawai, asking why she had told everyone about the past. But instead of admitting her part in it, Kawai began defending herself. She told Mashiba and Nagatsuka that Shuya had been the only person responsible for bullying Shuko, claiming she had actually been trying to stop him back then. Hearing this destroyed Shuya. He could not believe that after everything, people were still trying to separate themselves from what had happened. Unable to handle it, he ran away from school while Nagatsuka tried calling after him. He rode his bike without knowing where he was going until he finally stopped. Alone, Shuya admitted something he had always known, that he still hated himself. Later, he ran into Shoko, Yuzuru, and Sahara. They immediately noticed something was wrong, and soon the others arrived as well. Kawai apologized, but even during her apology, she continued blaming others and trying to prove she was innocent. This time, Ueno finally called her out. She reminded Kawai that she had laughed along with everyone else when Shuko was being bullied, and she wasn't some hero who had tried to save Shuko. The argument became too much for Shuya, so he told everyone to stop. He said that everything had started because of him, where he had been the one who had hurt Shuko first, and he refused to let everyone pretend otherwise. When the others tried comforting him, Shuya finally exploded. He pointed out everyone's hypocrisy, calling out their lies and excuses to try to hide behind their flaws. Even Nagatsuka and Mashiba were hurt by his words because they were only trying to help him. After everyone left, Shuya tried talking to Shuko again and asked if they could hang out. But when he saw her forced smile, he realized that she was hurting too. That night, Yuzuru read through Shuko's old notebook, while her grandmother invited her for a late-night snack. The grandmother noticed how much Yuzuru worried about her sister and told her that she had always been a kind and caring person. Yuzuru admitted she did everything for Shuko because she did not want to lose her, and her grandmother reassured her that she was already a blessing to their family. Later that night, Yuzuru had a nightmare about Shuko dying. She woke up terrified and immediately hugged her grandmother, crying. The next day, Shuya brought bread to the bridge, hoping to meet Shuko and feed the fish together as they used to, but she never appeared. While feeding the fish alone, he noticed Yuzuru nearby, crying. At first, Shuya tried giving her space, but Yuzuru eventually approached him. When he asked why she was crying, she said it was none of his business, but Shuya disagreed. He told her that he cared, so because of that, she asked him to accompany her to a funeral, which was her grandmother's. During the funeral, Yuzuru and her family mourned their heavy loss, with their mother trying her best to hold everything together. Afterward, a butterfly landed on Yuzuru's hand, and she let it go, realizing that just like her grandmother, some things could not be held forever. The butterfly then flew towards Shuko, but unlike Yuzuru, she did not try to catch it. During summer vacation, Shuya invited Shuko to an art exhibition. As they walked around together, Shuya noticed how distant she seemed. He remembered the girl from his childhood and how much pain she had carried. Suddenly, he slipped and fell, and Shuko immediately apologized. When Shuya asked why, she quietly explained that being around her only made people unhappy. She believed she was the reason everyone suffered, but Shuya rejected that idea and told her that he wanted to continue spending time with her during summer vacation. At home, Shuya thought about everything. He wanted to reconnect with everyone, but he was afraid because he believed he had ruined those relationships beyond repair. Still, he continued spending time with Shuko and Yuzuru almost every day. Eventually, Shoko invited him to her house for her mother Yaeko's birthday. Together, they prepared a cake, and when Yaeko arrived, she immediately became furious seeing Shuya there. But Yuzuru calmed her down and convinced her mother to let him stay. During the celebration, Yaeko revealed that she had submitted Yuzuru's photography work into a competition after Shuko had encouraged her. Yuzuru pretended not to care, but she was secretly happy. She then invited Shuya to join them for the fireworks festival, and at first he refused, but everyone forced him to come, and for once, Shuya did not run away. The day of the fireworks festival finally arrived, and Shuya found himself surrounded by people he never thought he would be close with again. He sat together with Shuko and her family, and for once, he was not watching everyone from a distance. Later, Yuzuru and Yaeko left for a moment to get food, leaving Shuya alone with Shuko. The two began talking, and Shuko revealed that her birthday was coming soon. Shuya immediately promised that they would celebrate it together, and after realizing what he had just said, he became embarrassed. Shuko noticed his reaction and quietly smiled. When the fireworks finally began, Shuko could not hear the explosions like everyone else, but she still enjoyed the moment by feeling the vibrations through her cup. It was a simple moment, but for her it was something special. However, after watching for a while, Shuko suddenly stood up and said she needed to go back home to study. Shuya offered to walk her back, but she told him to stay and enjoy the fireworks. Before leaving, she said goodbye and walked away. Shortly after, Yuzuru and Yaeko returned, and Yuzuru asked Shuya to go back to the apartment and grab her camera. Shuya agreed and headed back alone. When he arrived, the apartment was completely dark. He picked up the camera, but as another firework lit up the room, he noticed something outside. Across the balcony, a person was standing on the railing. At first, Shoya did not understand what he was seeing, but as he realized what Shuko was about to do, panic immediately took over. He rushed forward, trying to stop her, but he fell against a table and lost precious time. Shuko continued climbing higher, unaware of how much pain she was about to leave behind. With no other choice, Shoya screamed her name. For the first time in years, he used his voice not to run away from the past, but to reach someone. At the final moment, Shuya managed to grab her hand and prevented her from falling completely. Holding onto her with all his strength, he struggled to keep them both from going over. As his arms began to weaken, Shuya started praying to God, and he promised that if he survived, he would stop hiding from the world. He would face people directly, look them in the eyes, and finally accept the life he had been avoiding. Then he noticed the scars on Shoko's ear from the injury he had caused years earlier. The memory hit him all over again, and he broke down, apologizing for everything he had done. He told her that he had been the one who had hurt her, and that he should have protected her instead. As Shoko tried pulling herself back up, Shuya pushed with everything he had, using his own body to help lift her to safety, but in doing so, he lost his balance. Shuko reached out, but she could not stop him from falling. Shuya crashed into the water below, and as he sank, his entire life flashed before him. He remembered his mother, his friends, the moments he had spent with Shuko, and every person who had given him a reason to keep living. The boy who had once wanted to disappear finally understood how much his life meant. The next day, Yuzuru met Miyako at the hospital, and she told her that they should visit Shoya together. When Yaiko arrived, Miyako immediately started apologizing, blaming herself for what had happened. But instead of accepting her apology, Yaiko fell to her knees and begged for forgiveness from Shoya's family. Yuzuru joined her and explained that Shuya had saved Shuko's life. Seeing this, Miyako broke down, telling them to stop blaming themselves and to stand up. Meanwhile, Shuko was confronted by Ueno, who was furious. Ueno could not believe Shuko had almost caused Shuya to die after he had spent so much time trying to help her. She accused Shuko of only thinking about herself and not realizing how much people cared about her. But before Ueno could go any further, Yaiko stepped in and stopped her. The argument quickly turned heated, but Miyako arrived and separated them. She then walked toward Shoko, who immediately began crying and apologizing to the mother of the person who had traded his life for hers. Shuko begged for forgiveness, but Miyako did not blame her, as she understood that both children had been carrying painful feelings for years. Back at home, Yuzuru finally took down all the pictures of dead animals covering her room. When Yaiko asked why, Yuzuru explained that she had started taking those pictures because she had wanted to remind Shoko of death and stop her from giving up. But now that Shoko had started fighting for herself, Yuzuru no longer knew what she was supposed to do. Later, Nagatsuka visited the hospital and noticed Ueno refusing to let Shuko enter Shoya's room. He tried convincing her, but she refused. Instead, Nagatsuka took Shuko aside and talked with her. Shuko admitted that she felt like she had destroyed everything Shuya had worked so hard to build, and she believed that their friendship and everyone around him had suffered because of her. Nagatsuka refused to accept that. He told her that Shuya was his best friend, someone who had accepted him exactly as he was. Because of Shuya, Nagatsuka had learned what it meant to have someone truly care about him. As he talked, Nagatsuka began crying, admitting that he wanted his friend to wake up and come back. Hearing this, Shuko wrote that she wanted to fix everything she had broken. From there, Shuko began trying to reconnect with everyone. She started with Kawai, who immediately scolded her for what she had done and told her that she needed to stop hating herself. Kawai hugged her and told her that everyone had parts of themselves they struggled to accept, but they could not keep running away from them forever. Mashiba read Shuko's message and simply told her that he was glad she was okay. Then, Shuko visited Seihara, who admitted that she still felt like a coward who struggled to face difficult things. But Shuko encouraged her and told her that people could change. Finally, Shuko tried speaking with Ueno, who continued ignoring her every time she tried to approach. After several attempts, Shuko eventually covered Ueno with an umbrella during the rain, forcing her to face her feelings. Ueno still struggled to forgive everything, but she could no longer pretend that she felt nothing. A few days later, Shuko had a dream about her past. She remembered the painful moments she had shared with Shuya, but something felt different. In this dream, Shuya was not there. Instead, she imagined what her life would have been like without him ever appearing. The thought terrified her because she realized that despite all the pain between them, Shuya had also become someone who had given her a reason to keep moving forward. Then the dream changed. She heard Shuya's voice, telling her the same thing he had once struggled with, that he had wanted to disappear, that he had felt like he had no reason to keep living. Shuko woke up in fear, realizing that Shuya might still have been carrying the same pain she had carried for years. Without thinking, she ran toward the bridge where they had always spent time together. Meanwhile, Shuya woke up in the hospital and noticed something. The sound reaching him was not from the machines around him, but from Shuko's cries. He immediately got up, removed the medical equipment despite his condition, and left the hospital. followed the sound until he reached the bridge. Shoko was there crying uncontrollably, but the two of them suddenly saw each other, both frozen in disbelief. It felt impossible. After everything that had happened, after believing they had lost each other, they were standing face to face again. Shuko reached out and touched him, making sure he was real. When she realized he was alive, Shuya broke down laughing and fell to his knees, but Shuko could only stare at him through tears, unable to believe the person she thought she had lost was standing in front of her. Shuya apologized for everything. He apologized for bullying her, for hurting her, and for all the pain he had caused her when they were children. He admitted that he had been the reason she had suffered, but Shoko stopped him. She told him he was wrong. She believed that Shuya had almost died because of her, because she could not let go of the past, and because she still believed she was the problem. She said that she should have disappeared instead, but Shuya understood those feelings better than anyone. He told her that he had once thought, that he had once believed he did not deserve to exist because of his mistakes. But after everything that had happened, he had learned something important. Neither of them needed to disappear. Neither of them deserved to be alone. Shuya reached out and took her hand. He gently closed her hand into a fist and placed his own hand over it, creating a small promise between them. He wanted them to help each other live. Shuko looked at him, and for the first time in a while, she laughed. She used sign language to tell him that they would move forward together, where they were not trying to erase the past anymore, but were choosing to continue living despite it. Days later, Miyako drove Shuya back home after he recovered. When he arrived, Maria immediately ran toward him, excited to see him alive. Miyako noticed someone watching from a distance, and it was Ueno. She explained to Shoya that Ueno had been the one who had stayed at the hospital and helped take care of him while he was unconscious. Ueno approached him and immediately admitted that she still had flaws. She told him that she was a terrible person because even then, she could not completely accept Shoko, but she also revealed something important. She told Shuya that his old friends had been the ones who had saved him from the water. Hearing this, Shuya finally looked up, and for the first time, he saw Ueno's face clearly. He thanked her for everything she had done, and Ueno simply told him to stop acting like she was a good person and welcomed him back. Later, Shuya returned home and found Miyako cutting Yaiko's hair. The sight surprised him, but he slowly realized that despite everything that had happened, their families were beginning to move forward. Yaiko apologized for what had happened, and Shuya accepted it. Soon after, a man suddenly appeared, and Miyako explained that he was Maria's father. Before Shuya could process the situation, he remembered that Yuzuru was waiting for him in his room. Inside, Yuzuru showed him that her photography had won awards. However, her grades had completely fallen because she had spent so much time worrying about Shoko. She asked Shuya to help tutor her, and he agreed. Yuzuru also explained that she had started going back to school more often because she wanted to live up to her family's expectations. The next day, Shuya prepared himself for the school festival. He practiced smiling, greeting people, and apologizing. He knew returning to school would not be easy, but he wanted to try. Before leaving, he noticed the gift Shoko had given him earlier. He finally realized it had been meant for the plants, showing once again how Shuko had always cared about things growing and continuing to live. On his way to school, Shuya met Shuko outside, and together they entered the building. But the moment everyone noticed him, his anxiety returned. All his old fears came rushing back. He told Shuko the truth that he was still someone who could not look people in the eyes, someone who believed he had no friends and did not know how to act around others. But Shuko did not see him that way. She simply took his hand and walked beside him. She did not ask him to become someone else, but accepted him as he was. When they entered the classroom, everyone turned towards Shuya. The pressure became too much, and he ran into the bathroom. He started panicking, unable to face everyone. Outside the door, Nagatsuka was waiting. Shuya kept looking down, refusing to see him, but Nagatsuka shouted his name. He started crying, telling Shuya how happy he was that he had survived. He told him that what had happened at the bridge was already in the past, and he did not care about the mistakes Shuya had made, but he just wanted his best friend back. Nagatsuka hugged him, begging him not to disappear again. Shoya finally broke down and apologized. He thanked Nagatsuka for staying beside him when he had felt like nobody else would. Soon, Mashiba and Kawai arrived. Shuya still could not look at their faces, but Kawai stepped forward and gave him hundreds of origami cranes she had made as a prayer for his recovery. She admitted she had not managed to reach 1,000, but she still wanted to do something for him. Shuya accepted them and apologized to both Kawai and Mashiba. Ueno then arrived, calling everyone overly emotional. When Kawai started arguing with her, Sahara stepped in and apologized to Shuya as well, admitting that she had also struggled to face what had happened in the past. Ueno then turned to Shuko and signed something simple. She called her an idiot. But this time, Shuko was not hurt, because for the first time, Ueno was trying to communicate with her in sign language, the same thing she had once refused to do years earlier. Before everyone left, Shuya asked them for one more favor. He wanted to walk around the festival together and experience it with everyone. As they moved through the crowd, Shuya slowly removed the barrier he had built around himself. He opened his ears and listened to the sounds around him. He opened his eyes and finally looked at the faces of the people standing beside him. His friends, his family, the people who had stayed, the people who had forgiven him. The world he had spent years shutting out slowly returned. Tears filled Shoya's eyes as he realized what he had been missing all this time. He had spent years believing he needed to punish himself forever, but the people around him had shown him that life was not only about his mistakes, it was also about the connections he could build, the people he could care for, and the future he could still create. The boy who had once closed himself away from the world finally opened himself to it again, and for the first time in years, Shoya could truly see the people around him. Comment down below forgiveness if you watched till the end. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Wanted to try something different?